also beyond that is you know, we are teaching knowledge, okay? All teachers. So why you have some extra things like a creativity? It's like for teachers and extra things to think about. So what I try to approach this topic is try to first come to some basic idea about what is creativity and how to nurture creativity, and some basic idea about that. So I look at literature and summarize them in terms of three orientations. All three models, if you will. And let me give you an overview. So I first characterize one trend or one model's approach as a nurturing dispositions. Uh, so what is creativity? Creativity basically is a set of dispositions that actually allow us to generate new ideas. So this is the model to basically treat creativity as habits of mind. Thinking, it could be thinking disposition, it could be epistemic in general, it could be personal dispositions. I will give you more detail later. And the major theorist is Torrance, Paul Torrance, Robert Sternberg. If you want more people to be included, David Perkins and Mark Runkel could be counted in this category. The second approach is something what I call personalized construction. Basically, it's a more individual kind of a construction of knowledge in a way that produce some unique features, a unique representation of the world, a unique vision of the world. So what I call this Feldman model. Feldman, I'm not sure many of you know, Feldman is David Henry Feldman, who initially studied child prodigy, but he also studied Piaget as a developmental psychologist, and he feels that the Piaget, of course, being a constructivist, particularly cognitive constructivist, is very insightful about human development, cognitive development, but he omitted something very important, which is a non-universal aspect of our development. So in many ways, talent development is really a unique construction of their personal knowledge, construction of their skill set, and the construction of their personal vision. So in that regard, unlike Piaget, Feldman emphasized the non-universal aspect. Eventually, we all become unique in some way. So that's a Feldman's model. So creativity is really unique personal construction of the world with unique values, insights, vision, and knowledge and skill set. And then the third model that I basically characterize is called participation in practice. Is that it's not just a disposition, it's not just a construction of your knowledge, it's the participation, how you participate in a community of social practice, social practitioners, whether it's mathematics, whether it's physics, whether it's sports or something, that you participate. And you learn the modus operandi or something like that. So you learn the way of thinking and you critique the way of thinking in that field. Eventually you get creative. So it's by doing that you become creative. So that's the third tradition, our model. Creativity as an emergent property of productive problem-solving activities which are domain-specific, which are situated, which goal-oriented and interactive. That it means that creativity is never a solo act. It involves a community. All right, let's move on to the first. What I call, if the first orientation is right, let's call this a curriculum of dispositions. Psychological background, we can trace it back to Dewey because John Dewey basically said thinking is really a habits of mind, how you think about things, how you look at the universe. Really, you develop a set of disposition or habits of mind, to use Dewey's language. So, but Dewey also emphasized it can be trained, that we are by nature sloppy thinkers. Okay, we don't really think in a very sophisticated way, in a critical way, in a principled way, unless we go through some kind of education that our thinking becomes better. Okay, so that's a Dewey's idea. Torrance basically thinking that Torrance, I know that you probably know that there is a very famous researcher and a theorist in creativity, and his emphasis is how we nurture creativity. And he basically feels learning can be creative, learning, thinking can be creative when we teach in a certain way, okay, when we teach it. He also emphasized that disposition. On the opposite end of teaching for creativity, he said we can also learn by authority. Okay, earlier my colleague VJ, also my college kind of we actually graduate from the I don't know graduate from the same college, but he used to be studying in a university that I'm working now in Albany. And the thinking about stifling creativity. You can teach something by authority in a way that really stifle our disposition to think in a way that actually is conducive to creativity. Let me give you a quote, which is basically for Torrance's remarks. He basically said, a child learns creatively by questioning, by making inquiry, searching, manipulating, experimenting, even aimless play. In short, by always trying to get at the truth. Of course, broadly defined truth. So I personally feel that it's almost like a equivalent of an inquiry-based kind of learning. You know, it's kind of you're making inquiry about things, whether it's academics or whether maybe it's artistic. You can always make those kind of inquiries about why certain things happen in a certain way, and why is it always that way, or we can change it, or something like that. You provide alternative models about that. We also can learn by authority when we are told what we should learn, and when we accept our idea as true on the word of some authority. We have that in our classroom. And don't ask why. Just remember it. Just memorize it. Okay. This is the correct answer. This is called correct answer education. Okay. So that happens a lot also. Mark Runkel recently developed a simple theory of creativity. He feels that the creativity theory get a little bit proliferated, so many ideas, so many theoretical models. Can we actually simplify it, reduce, or not use the word reduce, to come back to the basic idea of creativity? So he thinks we can do that. And he searched the literature and find out from a personality perspective, there was a list of things that we can think definitely contribute to creativity. If you search people who are creative, prove to be creative. Autonomy, personal autonomy, the courage to create. So creativity, according to Mark Runkel, always has some degree of discretion. When he says discretion, he means, or if you ask Robert Sternberg, he will also mean, we decide to be different. Okay, there was some decision making. You decide to play safe. You decide to take risk. That's the discretion you exercise. Broad interests, authenticity. I mean, authenticity is really very illuminating to me because of being born and raised in China in a culture that doesn't really pay that much attention to individuality, spontaneity. This authenticity, live your life in a true way, in a way that's true to yourself. Not inhibit yourself too much, which is proved to be a very important aspect of a creativity. Some earlier, I'm not sure whether it's here or somewhere, I heard people mention primary processes as involved in creativity. In a sense, our primary processes tend to be inhibited by civilization, by our teachers, by our parents, or by anything. But those kind of primary processes probably is something that eventually lead to a very unique way to look at the world or feel about the world. So authenticity definitely is a very important aspect. Openness, I don't want to talk too much about openness, quite straightforward. Adventurousness and tolerance. Tolerance, when he say tolerance, It is about environment. He find that not only he find that, for example, Richard Florida, who wrote a book called The Class of Creative Class, the Rise of Creative Class, also mentioned that the tolerance is always very important from an environmental perspective, that you need a tolerant environment to allow creativity to come out. So according to this approach, Robert Sternberg will say a lot of things about how teachers can do, what we can do, what kind of a learning environment we can create. For example, he said we can redefine problems differently. We don't have to define problem one way. We can redefine it. We can look at things from different perspectives. We can question and analyze assumptions. So in that sense, creativity involves critical thinking. So a lot of times we separate critical thinking and creative thinking. Actually, creativity takes a lot of times critical thinking. It takes critical thinking to find gaps, find discrepancies. It takes critical thinking to think about whether you are on the right track. So it's not just divergent thinking. It's also think about whether you are on a more promising path. Encourage idea generation, recognize limits of knowledge. I think when we say about limits of knowledge, recognize limits, it's epistemic stance. That is, can you play with the idea you may not agree with? I happen to be the person who liked to do that. I wrote a book in 2010, published in 2010. I always look at different perspectives. I have a position, definitely, but I don't mind play a little bit with the opposite side to see how the opposite side will look at the issue. So that is also important. In that sense, we know that the knowledge is not just one way to look at the world. Maybe knowledge we can crisscross, so we can also look at from different angles, and maybe all of them have some truth in it. Okay, so limits of knowledge also basically means that earlier we have a discussion of a chaotic mind versus disciplined mind or something. We probably need both in some way. We need both. Sometimes we need a more disciplined mind, more principled mind. Other times we need to have a more playful mind in terms of chaos, not necessarily in a derogative, negative way to look at a chaotic, but in a sense that you allow different ideas to play up, to play, or even sometimes competing ideas. Identify and surmount obstacles, encourage sensible risk-taking, encourage tolerance of ambiguity, help students find what they love to do, interest, almost without exception. Interest is really almost a catalyst for creativity for good reason. I don't want to elaborate too much, but definitely if you think about interest, it's just not interest. Affective aspect, it's very cognitive as well. And it gets you deeper in a particular topic, on a particular topic, for example. Teach students the importance of delayed gratification. Earlier, Dr. Subanik mentioned this delayed gratification experiment, the marshmallows experiment. So educational implication generally, I think, is how we create a climate of free exploration. Yesterday, we went to watch a dance. Very interesting one. I was quite fascinated about that. It's what? It's a you know better than I do. Of course, last night was the first time I saw this dance. I was quite fascinated. And what I find is that in that dance, there definitely was something improvising aspect. There was something communicative on the spot, which is generating. So there was one part is a very well prepared aspect of creativity, but there was another part of it is a spontaneity. So in